I love you more than I love books.
Ah, swoon.
Yeah, it is. It's such...
If that came from either one of us, I mean, that means everything.
It's perfection. What are we doing, Amanda?
My Lady Jane, which is blowing up on Amazon Prime if you haven't watched it. This one entirely was you coming to me. It wasn't even on my radar.
Yeah, this was kind of a super fun. I'll just go off on a tangent really quick and then we'll dive into our cocktail for today. But I was kind of on a deep dive of just finding a show to watch. I was just feeling a slump of book. I just couldn't find a book I could get into. And I just wanted some kind of fantasy show to watch. I already watched Game of Thrones. I just wanted something else. And so I just started looking for shows and somehow stumbled on My Lady Jane. And it wasn't even out yet. It was just a preview for the show. And I didn't know the name. I only saw a clip in a coming, soon to Amazon Prime kind of thing where they show all the little clips for all their new shows. And immediately I was like, what is that? I want to know what it is. And then my second thought was, is it a book? And I looked it up and it not only was a show that was coming very soon, but it also was a book. So of course I immediately went and bought the book and texted Amanda and the rest is history.
And our co-host from our Folktown podcast, she was also ahead of the curve with you. And you two had already read the book, watched the show. And I was just starting it. And you guys were like, just hurry it up, please. We need to talk about this. And once I did, this was such an easy cocktail to make, by the way.
I'm excited.
So her name, the main character's name is Lady Jane Grey. So obviously this has to be the Lady Jane Grey, which... we love a good pun here. And I love a good gin cocktail. So we're using Earl Grey tea, infused tea. And this is a cold cocktail, though. So we're going to infuse the Earl Grey tea. And we're going to add some gin. Because gin and Earl Grey and your favorite and my favorite, one of our favorites, lavender. So you're going to do lavender simple syrup. And then shake that all together and use a sprig of lavender for garnish. Which I know looks pretty, but there are mixology properties to it as well.
Yeah.
The aromas are beautiful. And a little bit of lemon juice if you want it. If you are a cocktail nerd like me and this does not freak you out, and I feel like this might freak you out, Dale, you can shake an egg white in there too. And it makes a really nice fluffy cocktail with a very creamy mouthfeel. And I know you've tried it, right?
Yes. I was just going to say, I was totally freaked out by that. But once I had it in a cocktail, I was like, okay, I don't know what. It's like meringue. It's like lemon meringue.
Exactly. And it makes the cocktail so nice and fluffy. So that's our Lady Jane Grey. Cheers.
Cheers.
And it doesn't have a lot of ingredients because this is following the historical story of Lady Jane Grey, who is queen for all of 9 days.
Yeah. And I love, literally on the cover of the book, it says, sometimes history gets it all wrong. And it's such a quirky, fun read.
So sarcastic. I was laughing. I can't remember the last time a book made me laugh.
Yes. Literally from the first chapter until the very end, it just hooks you, and it's just such a good read. It's also a really quick read. It's a pretty hefty book, but
you rip through it. And written by 3 women. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Which incredible. When also researching it, I had to figure out who, was the author, and it's 3 authors, which is awesome. And there's so many books that they've written.
Yeah. So Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. Those are their names. I'm cheating. I have my Goodreads pulled up right now.
Yeah. It's everything. And we can dive right in because there's so many. Okay. Not only is the book fantastic, the writing is just, it's so sassy and
it's sarcasm, man. It's like modern day Shakespeare. So Shakespeare was supposed to be funny. I think people forget that a lot of, Shakespeare's plays were supposed to be funny. And this is like modern day version of that.
Yes.
And I love that there's a portion in the book where they're like, okay, it's like somebody took a record and they were like, "Arr!" And they were like, everything that happens after this point, we completely made up because the real story is such a goddamn bummer. So get over it.
Let's rewrite history. Should have gone. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny.
I also really appreciated, and maybe this has something to do with the fact that it was written by 3 people. I loved the narration of this story because it never stays the same. It goes from someone narrating to Jane's perspective to G's perspective, and I can't. I love it. It's such a good book. It was such a fun find. And then, like, you know how sometimes you find a book and you're just kind of like, but it just, from the moment I read it, I was like, this is fantastic. And then, of course, the show came out, and I had seen the show before I read the book, and it was incredible. And don't get me wrong, the book and the show, wildly different. There's so many differences, but I mean, we'll get into some of those on today's episode, but like I ate up both.
And there's the narration in the book when the narrator is doing it. I do not think they could have transferred that to screen any freaking better. So Oliver Chris, not to jump into the show, but because there are so many big differences, I feel like we're going to have to talk about these like 2 separate entities. But Oliver Chris is the narrator in the show, and he is so friggin' funny. Like his commentary and just the cadence of his British accent, and
he's
like
so snappy.
Oh my God, he's like, you're sitting next to him at a fashion show and he's just ripping everyone apart. That's what it feels like. It's so good.
That's a perfect way to describe it. It is.
He's just, oh my God, people watching. It's so, so good. And, a lot of, like we said, a lot of this is true. Like,
it's
King
based on
Edward
a real person.
And Princess Mary. Yeah, like all of this stuff is true, but the way that they change the story.
Yeah. And okay, so I guess we can kind of like explain a little bit. There are going to be some spoilers. We're going to give away a lot of stuff. One of the biggest things is obviously they changed some facts in the history. One of those things is that there is magic in this book.
Yeah.
And there are Ethians, which are people who have these, they change into animals. And that's
so basically like Animagus from Harry Potter. That's what they are.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Right?
And I think like that in itself is great. And you find that out right away in the book. And you kind of like, Jane is kind of obsessed with it because it's something that she is not. And she there's a lot with that. But in the show, you kind of like, it's kind of thrown at you because there's no real, like, you don't know it's coming until it happens, and then they explain that it's happening. And one of the things I just want to like throw in there right off the bat is the ages for the story in the book is very different than the show. So they like kind of made them more of today's time because in the book, both
they're children.
Yeah. So Jane is 16 and so is the king. And so that's kind of a big thing. But the whole concept is pretty much the same. Like the storyline is very similar, but there are some big differences as like the age thing. And one thing that I like immediately was like, oh, okay, that is a different thing. But I kind of love that they like did their own thing, is that Jane is supposed to be a redhead.
Yeah.
But I mean, I could not picture a better fit for the casting. Like they nailed it. And I know maybe people will be annoyed by the fact that like we did watch the show before reading the book, but in all honesty, I don't think I could have envisioned anyone else. Like I think they nailed it. The casting anyway.
Lord Dudley is just and because in the book, he really sucks. Like, he super sucks in the book.
Yeah.
But in the show, it's like there's these moments where you're like, He's kind of hilarious.
He is.
Really loves his son.
He's so
in
quirky.
the show. Yeah, he's just such a weirdo. And in the show, essentially the story is Mary is kind of manipulated into becoming the queen. And in the show, it is her mom and Lord Dudley, who's Guilford, who eventually becomes Jane's husband. They work together to make this happen. But in the book, it's all creepy Dudley that makes it happen.
Yeah. Sorry, you meant Jane. I was like,
Jane, did I say
you
Mary?
said Mary.
I'm sorry.
I was like, that is, yes. Yeah. She's, I
hate her. I hate her.
Well, and so that's a great point to bring up too. There's a definite change to the storyline for one of the other main characters, which is Gifford, who is going to be Jane's husband. In the show, his mom died tragically, and he turned for the first time. So, spoiler: he is an animal,
a steed.
Yes,
you will?
He's a has a beautiful mane. I think that's what they call them on horses.
No, you're correct.
And in the book, that is not the case. So his mom and dad, obviously, are both alive. And his dad in the book is the king's right-hand man, where in the show, he is not. But I kind of loved both versions.
Agreed.
Because the characters for the show, I think when you have, for example, if you have the dad, right, is kind of like the evil character, and you want to understand the drive of the male character, so like the love interest in this story, I think it's tricky when that is the main plot, which is kind of the book, whereas in the show, there's another character who is the villain alongside, of course, the king's, is it half-sister? Queen Mary or Princess Mary.
Worst. She's
the worst.
Freaking worst. Bess is
the worst.
Mary's the worst.
And in the book, I can't remember. So in the show, they have where her mother is beheaded, and she is just very, very angry about that. But in the book, she was, if I'm wrong, I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure she was also an Ethian. And that is part of why she was killed.
He hated her, like Henry VIII.
Yeah.
But Henry VIII, King Henry in the show's dad, Henry VIII, in the book is famously an Ethian who turns into a lion.
Yes.
Hence Henry the Lion, which everyone spoke of that.
And that quote where like, don't eat the messenger, it came from that.
It came from that. But in the book, is it the book or the show where King Henry eats Mary's mom when he's a lion?
Okay, that's what happens.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember what happened to Mary's mom. I was like, what is it? Because in the show, the king is not an Ethian. Like that's just not
he's a Verity. Who are the people that are not Ethians?
Exactly. And I think so in the book, there's also kind of a big storyline where obviously Jane is being forced into this marriage. She does not want to get married. And the now king kind of agrees to this marriage because Lord Dudley encourages this marriage to happen because he wants his son and then their heir to become king. And so he's kind of, forced into that situation. And the underlying thing is the fact that he is a horse. In the show, that's like the big secret, but in the book, everyone knows about it, and except for Jane. Like Jane does not know, and they call him G. So Gifford, who's the son, he kind of battles with that. Like he wants to tell her, but he also is he just keeps putting off like, oh, it's not the right time. I'll wait. I'll tell her on the wedding night. I'll tell her before anything happens. And so there's a lot of inner turmoil that you read, whereas in the show, you don't get that. You just get that this is a secret that they're all going to keep from her and she may never find out. Like that's kind of what they're hoping.
And it's a curse in both the show and the thing where he can't control when he changes, where other Ethians, they can control when they change into their animal form. So in the show, it's kind of hilarious because it's like the minute the sun goes down, bye-bye, he's a horse. Yeah. And so he like everyone thought that he was just some big playboy who was going out getting laid every night because the minute it was nighttime, nobody could find him.
Yeah.
And come to find out he was just galloping around as a horse.
Yeah. And I think part of that too was like to kind of help hide the fact that he was, because in the show, it's illegal to be an Ethian. Like they're kind of, pushed to the outskirts of the cities and really condemned. And in the book, that's not really the case, but they're still not really well liked or understood. And so there's a lot of just like underlining hatred for those people. And it kind of like, it was an interesting to do this side by side of like, the book to the show. I feel like that was a pretty big difference because Gifford's whole drive throughout the entire show is to get rid of this curse. He doesn't want to be an Ethian, and he thinks that he killed his mother. And his dad like won't tell him whether that was the case or not. And so there's this really like, this is his drive throughout the entire show. And he kind of agrees to marry Jane because she's very smart and she knows a lot and she loves reading books and she's incredible. And he basically marries her for her brain. And that's even like a line where she's like, in the show, she's like, so you married me for my brain? And it's like,
just like can't believe it. Can I tell you the one thing that really like made me sad that they didn't add to the show?
Yeah.
Is in the book, when Jane and G eventually get married, right? And they're on their honeymoon in the book. And every day when he's a little horsey, they sit under a tree and eat apples together. She feeds him apples and reads him books. And then they do this for like every morning for a few days. And then when they're like really falling in love, G admits to Jane that he could understand the books the whole time. And it's just the cutest little
it's so sweet.
Nuggets. And they don't do it in the show.
I know. I think because there's so much, like they put a lot in the book. There's a lot of storyline happening. Like there's multiple things all happening at once. And I think the way they handled it in the show was very flawless. I think it
agreed. Yeah.
Perfectly. It gives you a villain. It gives you the hero. It gives you the love story. It worked really well. But the book story is also incredible because you get so much more.
And Jane's Ethian in the book.
Like literally all of the people are basically.
Yeah.
And that kind of like comes out throughout the show is that Jane in the book is obsessed with Ethians, but she is not one, or so she thinks. And she kind of just wants to be one. There isn't any like conflict between her and G where like she can't find a cure kind of thing, where in the show that is part of the thing. But I think that helps build that tension and that relationship between them because they are very much thrown together. And you kind of have to understand, like, she wants nothing to do with getting married. She wants to be a free spirit. She does not want a husband. And she tries numerous times to get away from her mother, who is this overbearing, just wants to marry off her children so that she has money and has like a lovely, she doesn't have to do with anything in her life. She can just sit back and enjoy her life. And in the show, Jane's father died. You don't really hear too much about it. And same thing within the book, but you do get a little bit of him in the very beginning. And then he does he die? I don't remember how he dies or if they even talk about that. But I believe he was like a merchant or something that went and sold things. And so he's on a ship and he died. I forget. I can't remember for the life of me what happened to the dad, but not an important sidebar.
The mom's hilarious in the show, though.
She is. And the casting.
Her tryst that she has with her now son-in-law's brother.
Yes.
So G's brother, older brother in the book is this like very perfect man with a perfect wife and perfect children,
basically.
Yeah. And then in the show, he is just a wreck.
He's
hilarious wreck.
And
he's so
engaged.
Funny.
He's engaged to be married to. Is it a Spanish princess? But she has was it the plague? Or like
the Spanish flu, I think. And it's hilarious. And the mom and him have a little fling. And so much so that the way that they bring this story into modern times, he goes outside the castle and like starts playing her music from below in the castle. Like it's a 1980s John Cusack movie with a boombox.
Yeah.
Like playing music up to her window. And she is just like, what?
She wants nothing to do with him.
She
so just kind of, I feel like she just wanted to use him a little bit. Like she knew she could, at first, I think it was for fun. And then she realizes she can get information out of him. And she very much uses that.
100%.
Very much.
It is a very, very, I love what they do with Henry in the book versus the show and the show versus book, vice versa. So King Henry is Jane's cousin. I don't know if we mentioned that, but he decides he's very sick with, unknown sickness.
King Edward. I was like, wait,
King Edward. And I'm reading the notes right here and it says
Henry's the father.
Henry is the father.
It's because your
Guys,
boo
I'm
is
so
Henry.
sorry. I'm so tired. So yes, he's dying from some unknown illness and we don't know why. He's just coughing and they say he's got, what's it? Oh
my gosh. I know exactly.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's not the illness. It's not the plague. It's the
affliction. He has
the affliction. And so they're just chalking it up to this guy's going to kick the bucket any minute. And in the show, he's maybe 20 years old, right?
Yeah.
My favorite character of both book and show is, of course, Petunia.
Yes.
Who is his dog. Eventually, Petunia just kind of smells his blackberry pie. That's his favorite blackberry pie that's coming in every morning.
That his sister makes for him special.
Bitch ass Mary is making special for him. And the dog's like, no, you're not eating that, and knocks it over and realizes he's being poisoned. So he just stops eating and eventually gets better and he doesn't have the affliction. And but they switch up his story a little bit. And I think what I'm feeling is they did like 3/4 of the book in season 1.
Fair.
Because there's the whole portion of the back end of the book that they haven't touched on yet, but they're building you up for it. Like, I don't think they're going to change a lot of what happens in the book so much so that's not going to happen. I just feel like we're getting it in season 2.
Fair. And I think I agree with you 100% because there's so much that happens. For example, we find out, again, guys, these are spoilers. If you have not read the book,
super spoiler,
you need to read the book. Like Jane she's also an Ethian, which we mentioned, but so is her mother. And so is King Edward. And so is like pretty much everybody is an Ethian.
Except for Mary.
Until the very end. And she turned into a cat? I forget.
I don't know, but like she's so anti-Ethian because of her mother and like her father. And so she's like, she wants to kill all the Ethians.
Oh my gosh,
I forget what she turns into.
This is one of the best moments of the book. Mary turned into an ass as Bess. So Bess is the other sister. And she says, this is like the line from the book. So it says, Mary turned into an ass as Bess tells her Edward is the rightful king and Mary never she never is able to turn back into a human. So like, as far as they know, she just remains an ass for the rest of time.
Forever.
And this is the other, like, one of the best moments in the book that I love. So we haven't really talked about this character too much, but Edward has another half-sister, and her name is Bess. And she's incredible. She's a sweetheart. She's also an Ethian. She turns into a cat. A cat or a fox? I can't remember. I think she's a cat. And at the very end of the book, so another
Grace is the fox in the book.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right, Gracie. Another little thing that's kind of a big difference is Edward, well, not a big difference. I think it's similar. Edward does not want to be king. He never wanted to be king. He was kind of thrown into it
at age 4.
Yeah, he was like a baby because his dad died and he was the next to inherit because he was male. Even though he wasn't the oldest, he was a male. So, man. But Bess is like this incredibly kind and she's kind of the perfect politician. She, hears everyone's needs and just is always very like articulate and she's just incredible. And you see that in the book. You don't see that as much in the show, but I think you get enough of it to understand. And maybe this will happen in the next, if they do it another season. But Edward basically says like, I abdicate and I want you to be the queen. Like, I want you to run this country. And it's beautiful because you really see like the love between, and like Bess really always is super sweet to Edward. Like, she doesn't know what's going on with Mary's situation. And in the show, there's Mary and who's the other guy? He's like this like spidery guy. I don't know his name.
The one that Mary's banging?
Yeah.
His name is Lord. Dun, 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 dun. I have it written in my notes. He is Lord Seymour. No?
Okay.
Right?
Seymour? Yeah, that sounds right. Because he's the king's second hand, man. And,
in the show.
Right. And so in the book, like, he doesn't exist. There is that character is not there. But I love the character and I love the actor because it's kind of like it just kind of goes off because you don't get this side of Mary either, where there's kind of like she is like a dominatrix and he's like totally into it.
It is like it is so hilarious, their relationship.
It's
like
so
I think we're presenting this as like a romance, which it is, a wonderful romance in many aspects. This might be one of the funniest shows, funniest writing I have come across in so long. The way that they because in the book there is like a weird relationship, but not like this. And the way that they brought it to the show is so goddamn funny. And they have like moments where she's like arguing with him about who she's going to kill. And she's like, okay, that's it. Yeah, we're going to kill her tomorrow. And then she's like, okay, get back to it. And he just is like getting the shit kicked out of him by her.
She's got like a whip and he loves to be spanked.
And then she just drops it and she's like, I'm hungry, I need a drink, and just walks away. She's just bare ass sitting there, handcuffed to the bed.
It's fantastic.
So funny.
And the costumes,
it's so funny.
Like, her costumes are epic because they're just so out there and just like they get progressively more intense the further in the show you go, because I think it really shows she's crazy. So Mary is
played by Kate O'Flynn, by the way.
She's incredible.
I talk about casting. Yeah. Are you kidding me?
Perfection.
She is like
perfection. And they really, I will say, like, whoever directed the show, they nailed this character, because in the book
was
the character
Jamie Babbitt and Stefan Schwartz.
Oh, I don't know them, but they did a great job, because in the book you don't have that same character. She's evil, but you don't get all of this dimension in this character
so
specifically. The show version of her is terrifying. Like, she's actually terrifying, but also so quirky and like, I don't know. You like kind of love her, but you absolutely hate her. Like,
she's hilarious. She's just
it's just so
I just don't think we can paint the picture that we need to get people that have not watched or read this to do that.
Yeah.
It is just, I want to say it's romantic fiction. It's not. It's not historical romantic fiction. It is comedy. It is so goddamn hilarious. And it is like, her character is a perfect example is how they took that person, like you were saying, and put it onto a screen.
Yeah. It's so good.
I mean, I'm going to be very shocked. I know we don't talk about this kind of stuff on here a lot, but I'm going to be very shocked if the show does not win some awards, because it came in under the radar, right?
Yeah,
like, people weren't really talking about it.
Yeah.
It has exploded.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Book Talk found it.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think
service.
like it, yeah. And I think part of it too is there is so much going on in this book. And they delivered so well. Like, it just worked. Like it all came together. And again, I'm wondering the same thing that you were saying is I'm wondering if some of these like kind of bigger things that happen in this book, maybe they're waiting to start the next season out with more of this. So like one of the big things in the book too is when Mary gets to the point where she's going to behead Jane, because she's basically saying like Jane was never supposed to sign this decree saying that Ethians are free and, you know, should be treated like every other, you know, citizen. And in the show, it's slightly different. She like goes through this whole thing where she's gonna like maybe poison the guard, but then she like second guesses herself and she like doesn't do that. All she wants to do is get to Gifford, who is also locked away because Mary finds out he's, you know, an Ethian, all this crazy stuff. But in the book, the day before Jane is supposed to be beheaded, she's kind of panicking in this chamber and she changes for the first time. So it's the first time you realize like Jane has been so obsessed with Ethians and she's tried to change her whole life and she never could. And because she was just like wanting to get to her husband so desperately, not the beheading part, it wasn't that. It was the fact that she wanted to see Gifford for one last time or save him. And she turns into a ferret.
Which is so funny. It's just like so perfect.
It's incredible. And when she changes, she's like, she doesn't know what she is. She's like,
she has no idea what she is.
I think I'm bigger than a mouse. And I don't think I'm a rat because I don't have a long, skinny tail. But she can't obviously see herself.
And she's like, I feel like I'm soft.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm small and perhaps I'm long because my legs feel far away.
And it's so adorable because she gets to, obviously she finds Gifford and she like kind of is just like, what am I? I don't know what I am. But here's the other thing is she also can't turn. So she, like Gifford, can only turn when the sun goes or when the sun comes up, and Jane can only turn when the sun goes down. So they're never human at the same time. And that's kind of like that's their like the what's the word I'm trying to think of?
Well, that's their conflict.
Yeah.
That situation.
Exactly.
And it builds this sexual tension. But something I think we have to remember is this is a YA book.
Yes.
So when you watch the show, if you've watched before read like we have, Jane thinks that sex is called a very special hug.
Yep.
Okay. But in the show, Jane knows her shit.
Explains it too.
It's a very special hug. And they made the show so much spicier. It's very risque. Like,
so the very special hug in the show, what does her mom say? She's like, you hold hard things
for soft things and put them in places. Like, it's just ridiculous.
Hard things hard and soft things softly.
Soft. It's so fucking funny. And then they change in the book. There's Gracie, who becomes this person that helps Edward escape the castle because essentially he escapes and he's not being poisoned and blah, blah, blah. And in the book, it's Gracie who turns into a fox. And then all he keeps talking about in the book is how he's going to die a virgin.
Yeah.
And he's never kissed a girl.
Yeah.
And in the show, it is a very handsome gentleman named Fitz.
Yeah.
Who is a Scottish, or in the book, she's Scottish, right?
Yeah, she is, because
she's
that's kind of like a thing.
A Scottish Ethian. Yeah. And so Fitz kind of helps King Edward, and he's her Gracie, the Gracie. Mm-hmm. But he is a little bit meaner, I would say.
Yeah, and
you don't trust him right away. We're like, I trusted Grace right away.
Well, but to be fair, so that's also like a thing that we could probably bring up because it is a little bit different. So when Edward tries to escape, like when Mary's trying to kill him, he tries to escape and he's like running, but he had already turned. So he's a bird and he's like a hawk, but he's not. I forget what type of bird he is. He's like it's called a castro. It's a tiny falcon. And so he ends up in a barn, and that's when he meets Gracie for the first time. And he has no idea that she's an Ethian. And it's kind of like this back and forth. It's the same kind of thing where she's mean to him. She's got does she have a knife at his throat? She does.
Yeah, it's a very will they, won't they, like, what is this going to be?
Yeah. And I think what's interesting, too, is in the book, Edward kind of has a thing for Jane. And
kind of?
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to say kind of.
He's in love
He's in love with her. And the funniest part of the book is that they write it so that Edward is like, I really always thought it would be me and Jane. Like, I always thought I would end up with Jane and Jane would be my first and blah, blah, blah.
Because she's only my first cousin, so it's fine.
Yeah. And then the authors are like, and we acknowledge that this is disgusting.
Yeah.
The thinking back then was horrific, and that's why everyone had birth defects.
Yeah.
So moving on, like, it's just so funny the way that they acknowledge those things.
It's very creative. And I actually appreciate the fact that, like, obviously they're trying to be inclusive in the show, which I think, like, a lot of shows now are trying to be very inclusive. And I love it. Like, I love the fact that they decided to make the king clearly, like, as you're watching it, he's kind of like, I don't understand why I don't find women. Like, he doesn't know anything about anything, just like Jane.
Yeah.
And so, like, he doesn't understand that he doesn't find women attractive because he's not into women, but he doesn't know what that means. And so when he meets this guy, obviously things
Handsome
are like,
Fitz walks in.
And it's so good. It's so good.
And the grandmother.
Yeah, Granny.
Oh, Granny.
Which
she just wants to commit genocide in the show. She's like,
show,
let's kill everyone.
Yeah, the show, it's a little bit different. In the book, she's much more chill, and she, like, just helps them, and then they go about their way. And
she's kind of a badass in the book. It's kind of like, yo, badass Granny, I'll help you for a minute, and then you're out of here.
Yeah, and she's never, like, you know that she's not dead. Where in the show, it's, like, suspected that she's dead, but she's actually alive, and she's, like, in the nunnery or convict, whatever.
Convent, not convict. Well, they might feel like convicts.
They were. The one nun was like, her face was all.
Yeah, she was trying to kill him.
Yeah.
For trying to escape.
That was a little intense. And then there's the other part of this where, again, maybe they'll put it in the next one. I don't know. But there's a whole part where they, like, go to France when they're trying to defeat Mary, which doesn't happen in the show. And you meet some other characters, which I almost think, like, maybe we'll get them if they do a second season, because they're kind of cool characters, or there's potential there. So you meet who Edward is supposed to, or was supposed to marry, but, like, turned down the marriage proposal. And she's also, like, a 16-year-old girl. And he kind of, like, hates her, but then realizes, like, oh, wait, she's an Ethian, which she seemed to, like, he thought that she hated all Ethians, but she is actually an Ethian, and she just doesn't want to have to get married. Like, her whole thing is very similar to his. And then you also meet, is it the queen of, there's, like, another, oh gosh, they give them, like, their army. So it's the oh no, I guess that's the girl that he's supposed to marry.
Yeah, it's her. Yeah.
The Spanish princess. So, or the queen of Spain. I'm not even sure. I can't remember. But he basically, like, they have this friendship that is established, and she basically says, like, if I ever need anything, will you help me? So, like, it's definitely like there's going to be something else that happens.
I had pulled up an article when we were getting our notes together from Screen Rant, and the very last thing in the article says, very intentionally, JD Lane. My goodness gracious,
okay.
We're recording this at 8:30 at night, guys. Our brains are mushed potatoes. So, My Lady Jane only covers half of the book. They end the show where in the book it transitions from altered history to completely fabricated fantasy.
Yeah,
on purpose to set up for a season 2.
Yeah. Well, and there's a second book, so there's My Queen Jane.
And I think that maybe season 2 is going to be the second half of the first book and a little bit of that second book.
Fair.
And I think that happens a lot in shows like this, where you've brought up a great point that they've packed so much plot into a book. And while we flew through the book, it is a very dense book. It's like 400 something pages.
Yeah, I think it's just under 500.
474 it says on Kindle.
491.
Yeah. So it's not a tiny book, but you fly through it because the plot is so dense and so well written. I'm obsessed with both versions. I've got to be very honest with you.
I also just found in my notes. So it's Mary, Queen of Scots. She's the one that Edward was supposed to marry and then doesn't. And she is a mouse. But she also has an army of Ethians. That was the other thing, which I thought was super cool. Like, she's got this entire army of Ethians.
And she's so cool in the book. She's so cool.
And you're meant to like kind of hate her throughout the story. And then you find, and like Edward's kind of dreading running into her because when they go to France, he knows he's going to have to talk to her and her, new husband or her new arranged marriage. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, her betrothal.
And so, and also in that, in the show, Bess is kind of locked away with Mary, Edward's half sister. But in the book, Bess is the one that helps get Edward out of the castle. And she's also the one that helps them in France, which is another like where you really see her democratic abilities at
She's
play.
A great politician in the very best way. Like we all wish we had politicians like her.
Yeah.
And also another thing that I really kind of adored was in the show, because we've already brought up the fact that Ethians were really, they're a little bit, they don't have to hide in the book. They're just a part of society. They're just like the lesser part of society. Like they're lower class compared to everything else. No matter what money they make, if you're an Ethian, you're just not well respected.
Yep.
In the show, it is 100% you are killed. So there's so many people in the castle that know that Edward has Ethian in him, that he is supposed to be an Ethian. So you've got Penelope as the dog. Then you have the guy that handles all of the dogs, who they call him like the kennel master.
Yeah.
Also an Ethian. And every dog that they use for hunting everything, Ethians. They don't realize it.
And they're also his kids. Like
his kids and his children. And then you've got the cook and her son. Like all of these people in his castle are Ethians there to protect him. And Mary just goes bananas on them and is just like killing people left and right. Killing people in a way that is so brutal that it's hilarious. I don't know how to describe it without sounding cold, but in the show, she is just on a rampage.
Yeah, the show, and with that one scene where they're in the garden, she's got the bow and arrow, and she's literally just shooting people.
For
and then
sport.
She brings her sister out, and she just like tells her to run, and then she tries to shoot her. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
It's crazy, but you're laughing.
Yes.
And I know that sounds so wild, but you're laughing. And in the book, you don't kind of get this version of hilarity and insanity. But I love that this was written as a YA novel. Don't you? Like, I feel like if this was written the way that the show was portrayed with all the spice, don't get me wrong, the sex scenes are fantastic.
Yeah.
They're so well done. But I liked reading the book. Not that I care if there's a sex scene or not. I just really enjoyed reading the book and not expecting that because I had seen the show first.
Yeah, and I think it didn't need it. Like you were hooked without it. And I also like, we haven't touched on this, but in the book, Gifford is a poet. He writes poetry. That's his whole thing.
I love it.
He like goes to the bar late at night and writes poems. And like when Jane finds this out, she's like, wait, I thought you were sleeping around this whole time. You were going and writing poems? And then he like writes Jane poems. Like how stinking cute is that? That's precious. I think that's such a sweet little moment. And I think too, like, obviously in the book, they're both Ethians and they're both dealing with this curse, but yet they're falling so madly in love with each other. And you don't have any of the spicy stuff like the show has. But I will say one of my absolute favorite moments, and I think you will agree with this, is when they're at their honeymoon house and Gifford comes in like after the sun goes down and he turns back into a human man. He comes in and Jane has been waiting to tell him all the stuff that she's learned and found out through the day and hasn't been able to tell him because he's a horse. And they're talking and they're having this moment and she goes, Gifford. And he and there's just this moment where he looks at her and she looks at him, and it is the hand. It is the Mr. Darcy hand.
Punch.
And he looks at her and she goes, "What? Like, what is it?" And he's like, that's the first time you've said my name. And it is, I was hooked. I mean, I was hooked before that, but like, that's just,
both versions, they just fall in love with each other so hard. And I think it's because they realize neither one of them wants this.
Yeah.
Neither one of them are super pumped about the situation.
Yeah.
But they're able to be on the same side then. They become like us against the world.
Yeah. And I think they fall in love with their core. Like, it obviously they're both attracted to each other. That's like in the book as well as the show. Like, clearly they are attracted to each other. And like Jane says it numerous times that she's like very into him, but she doesn't think that he's into her, which is not the case. He thinks he's not good enough for her. And I love the fact that they don't make it about that. It's very much, even with the spicy scenes, you never get the feeling that it's like the reason they get into the moment, because there's so much buildup. There's so many times where they're just about to kiss.
Can we
in
talk
the
about
show.
The actors?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfection.
Did we say their names yet?
No, I don't think we did, because we got so excited.
I know. Emily Bader, she plays Lady Jane Grey, and Edward Blumell plays Guilford. And they are
perfection.
When you were just talking about how they're about to kiss, their chemistry, I felt like this is very Colin and Penelope in Bridgerton, right? Like, it is very, like, it's palpable.
Yes.
And you get that on the pages too. Don't get me wrong. You 100% get it. But I think because I saw these two obnoxiously good-looking people in the show first, when I read it, I was like, oh, this is so
it
good.
sold it.
It's so good.
And so while I was watching My Lady Jane, I was like, why do I know this actor? What was he in? And I loved him in that. And I realized he's in The Discovery of Witches. He's a vampire. So like,
which, stay tuned for that one, guys.
Yeah. Yo, just basically he's like awesome. And I can't speak any higher of the casting. I think they nailed it. I don't care about the fact that the details were changed. The description.
I think so perfect.
She is My Lady Jane. Her acting, the costumes they put her in, like everything about the show just worked and worked really well. And it's one of those books where like when you read a book, I mean, obviously this is what we talk about every time. You read a book and you have like these expectations. I didn't have them going into this because I watched the show. And sometimes what happens is then when you read the book, you can't get into it. Like you're kind of like, oh, I just can't. And it didn't happen. Not once. I devoured the show. I've watched the show like 3 times. And the book, I've read it physically with my eyeballs. And then I've also listened to the audiobook, which let's just put that out there. It's incredible.
So good. I read the book physically and then listened to the audiobook because you said it was so good. I was like, I gotta listen again.
It's fantastic. Like I can't speak higher of it. The actors that read the book it's great. It's like a totally different experience. Like each version, I couldn't. So I guess what's the question? Should you?
No, you have to do both. And like, here's the thing. I think you need to watch it. I think you need to read it because there was a part of me that watched the show and was like, there's no freaking way on earth this book is going to hold up to that show.
Yeah.
That was such a fun ride of a show. It was so refreshing. It was so new. It was like, it felt like watching a parody version of all of our favorite fantasy shows.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It was so silly
true.
and it was so fun. It was like everything I wanted it to be and didn't know that I wanted it to be. And I was like, this book is not going to hold up. Yeah. And to your point, I physically read probably the first 2 pages and the narrator just comes out the gate like it is a one-man show, just making you laugh so hard. Like the first, I'm going to pull it up because you have your book in front of you, don't you?
Yeah. What you want?
The first
Just read the first line.
couple sentences are ridiculous.
Yeah.
They're like, what the hell am I about to read?
Okay, so I'll just read it really quick.
Yeah.
This is the prologue. It says, "You may think you know the story. It goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a 16-year-old girl named Jane Grey who was forced to marry a complete stranger, Lord Guilford or Gifford, something or other, and shortly thereafter found herself ruler of a country. She was queen for 9 days. Then she quite literally lost her head. Yes, it's a tragedy if you consider the disengagement of one's head from one's body tragic. We are merely narrators, and we would hate to make assumptions as to what the reader would find tragic. We have a different tale to tell. Pay attention. We've tweaked minor details. ...
It's so like you read that and you're like, I am in for such a fun read. It's just so fun.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for reading that, because that's like one like that. I read that and I was like, I was like giddy. I was like, I am so pumped. And we've been reading a lot of romance lately and like kind of downer books.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that says a little bit about our brains right now. But like that's where we've been, that's where we've been. So this was so refreshing and so fun and like
refreshing. That's the perfect
so
word.
Refreshing.
That's the perfect word for this book. It is like a breath of fresh air. And
it was, yeah.
You get so much when you read the book that you might not get when you watch the show, but it's just, they're both so good.
You have to do both.
Yeah. Both.
Like if you're not going to read physically, just listen to it because it's so funny.
It is.
It's like listening to a podcast episode. That's truly what it felt like. Like I felt like I was hanging out with friends. I was like talking because I read the book in like a day and a half, but then listening to it, I was cleaning and I was like, oh my God, Jane, you crazy.
It
like,
makes you laugh out loud.
To my phone.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a conversation.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah. And I'm really excited. I'm going to continue the books.
Yeah. Same.
Because I know that the show will probably pop out, but
even if it doesn't, I'll keep reading the books.
I don't care. I'm still going to read the books.
Mm-hmm.
But that does bring up some sad news. So we're going to take like a week or so break, right? We're going away together. We're going together, guys.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not.
We are going away.
We're taking a mini little break. We have a big conference that we're going to and doing some major studio moving into a new studio. So
I cannot wait for you guys to see that. Oh God.
It's going to be
so
epic.
But head over to our Patreon because we're going to put some behind the scenes stuff from the conference on there and
all kinds of goodies.
Yeah, we're going to be hanging out with like the whole Gotham West crew. So you'll get to finally put some faces to names that we throw out on here and you get to listen to at the end of every episode. And you get to see what they actually look like over on our Patreon. So
yeah, it's going to be great. We're pretty excited.
And yeah, as always, head over to Watch It or Read It on Instagram and Facebook and the TikToks, which we haven't put anything up on there in a little while, but we will because we have got some content.
We're going to come back.
Building a studio, guys.
Yeah.
So that this is just the best.
Yeah, it will be better than ever once we're back. It's going to be awesome. We're pretty pumped.
But we agreed that you need to watch it and read it, but it's kind of sad that we're not going to be recording for a couple weeks, but we'll be back.
Yeah, we will be. It will be good.
Together. Right now we're in
forever.
Both in the same state, but just very far away.
It's a little bit different.
It is.
So on that note,
we'll see you guys soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Our editor is Katie Yonner. Our associate producer is Grace Heerman. Our production coordinator is Nicole Vargas, and our senior content producer is Kyle Bosch. Our executive producer is Tommy West, and Watch It or Read It is produced by Gotham West Studios.
The Labor Day weekend sale is on at Tanger Outlets. Score up to 70% off at top brands like Nike Factory Store, Crocs, J. Crew Factory, Gap Outlet, and so many more. Refresh your wardrobe with the latest arrivals for less from all your favorite brands this Labor Day weekend. Tanger Outlets. Always on trend, always on sale. Plan your trip at Tanger.com.